Have you ever wondered why the man who seems to put in the least effort is the one who attracts the most, while you, who give everything, who craft the perfect message, who are attentive and warm and available at any hour of the day, end up alone in front of your phone screen waiting for a reply that never comes? What you just felt when you heard that question, that small punch in the chest, that discomfort you can't name as shame or recognition, is exactly the signal that what I'm about to say cuts directly into your life. We live surrounded by a narrative built over decades, fed by movies, songs, TV shows, and well-meaning people with profoundly misguided ideas. That narrative goes like this: be kind, be attentive, show your feelings, prioritize the person you love, prove how much you need them, and love will come naturally. It sounds beautiful. The problem is that narrative has destroyed entire generations of men who followed every single one of those steps to the letter and ended up confused, humiliated, and alone, with absolutely no understanding of what went wrong. It didn't go wrong because you were insufficient. It went wrong because nobody ever told you the truth about how human attraction actually works. And the truth is far more complex, far more interesting, and far more liberating than any comfortable lie. The road to hell is paved with good intentions and unanswered texts. Today, we're going to talk about psychology, biology, and a man named Arthur Schopenhauer, a 19th century philosopher who wrote things so uncomfortable about human nature that his contemporaries preferred to ignore him for decades. A man who never had a stable romantic relationship, who lived alone with his dog, and who, paradoxically, understood something about desire and attraction that most modern psychologists still don't dare say out loud. But before we get to Schopenhauer, I need you to be honest with yourself. How many times have you changed something about yourself to make someone like you? How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no? How many times have you switched off a part of your personality, your opinions, your intensity, your actual self, because you believed it would make you easier to love? How many times have you built your entire day around whether or not that person replied to you? And here's the question nobody asks out loud: did it ever actually work? Did the version of yourself that disappeared into someone else's preferences ever get chosen and stay chosen? There's a concept I want you to keep in mind throughout this entire video. It's called the center. There are men who walk into a room and something about them seems anchored. They're not checking if people like them. They don't adjust their posture or their words depending on who's watching. They're just there, completely present, completely within themselves. And that, without anyone being able to rationally explain it, is magnetic. Then there are other men who walk into that same room, and even if they're better looking, even if they dress sharper, even if they say all the right things, something about them seems to be searching. They're tracking the reactions of others. Their energy doesn't come from within, it flows outward into the world, begging to be reflected back. And that, even though nobody says it out loud, makes something dim. That difference, subtle but absolutely decisive, is what Schopenhauer tried to describe with his concept of the will, and it's what modern psychology calls, with different terminology, exactly the same thing. Schopenhauer was born in 1788. His mother, Johanna, brilliant, independent, and entirely unwilling to pretend she enjoyed her own son's company, once wrote him a letter saying more or less that he was unbearable to be around and that his presence felt like a weight. Arthur was 17 years old when he received that from his own mother. The philosopher who would go on to write the most penetrating analysis of human desire received his first major wound from the first woman in his life. That doesn't explain everything, but it explains the lens. A lens that wasn't looking for comfort, a lens that was looking for truth, even when that truth was ugly. And the truth he found, after years studying Eastern philosophy, primitive biology, and his own experience of relational failure, was this: human beings do not choose with reason. They believe they choose with reason. They construct rational arguments to justify their choices. But underneath, they are being moved by something far older, far more powerful, and completely foreign to conscious thought. You are not the author of your decisions. You are the narrator who explains them afterward. He called it the will, a blind impulse without moral purpose that operates beneath all awareness and directs human behavior towards survival and reproduction, without asking permission, without consulting your values, without caring in the slightest about what you think you want. Schopenhauer wasn't saying humans are simply irrational animals. He was saying something far more disturbing, that our reason very often doesn't direct our decisions, it justifies them after they've already been made by processes we aren't even aware of. Modern neuroscience, a century and a half later, confirmed this. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio demonstrated with patients who had damage to the emotional region of the brain, but with intact reasoning, that those people were incapable of making decisions. They could analyze any situation perfectly, but they couldn't choose, because choosing requires feeling. It requires that irrational impulse Schopenhauer called the will. What does this have to do with relationships? Everything. Because when a man designs his entire pursuit strategy from pure reason, when he calculates the perfect message, constructs the ideal romantic gesture, tries to convince someone he deserves to be loved through demonstrations of affection, he is appealing to the wrong system entirely. He is speaking to another person's rational mind, while attraction operates somewhere far older, far faster, and completely beyond the reach of logical argument. Attraction is not persuaded. Attraction is felt, or it isn't. And what generates it is not what you say, but what you transmit. And what you transmit is not a conscious decision. It is the result of who you are in each moment. Think of a man you know who seems to have everything working against him according to the romantic script we all learned. He's not the most attentive. He doesn't rearrange his life to fit into someone else's. He has his own things, his projects, his direction, and he doesn't abandon them for anyone. And yet, he attracts. Without visible effort, without strategy, he generates that pull people search for and rarely know how to explain. Now contrast that with a man who follows the rule book, always available, responds within seconds, cancels his plans when asked, says what he thinks people want to hear, who needs, visibly, even when he tries to hide it, to be chosen. The difference between those two men is not how much they feel. The second man probably feels more. The difference is where their security lives. The first man has his center inside. His self-worth doesn't depend on anyone's approval. It exists before anyone looks at him. It persists even if no one chooses him. The second man has his center outside. His emotional stability depends entirely on how others respond. If they reply, he breathes. If they don't, the world collapses. And here is the cruelest irony of all this. The more you need to be chosen, the less attractive you become. The less you need approval, the more you receive it. Not because you're indifferent, but because emotional independence, the sense that your life has value with or without anyone's validation, signals something the primitive instinct is scanning for. This person will not fall apart. This person will not make me responsible for their wholeness. Desperation has a scent, and everyone can smell it, except the person wearing it. But be careful, because there's an enormous trap many men fall into the first time they hear this. Performed indifference doesn't work. Calculated coldness doesn't work. Playing hard to get, ignoring someone on purpose, using silence as a manipulation tactic, all of that is just as desperate and just as dependent on external approval as the opposite extreme, only in the opposite direction. Your behavior is still dictated by how you think others will perceive you. It's still external. What generates real attraction is not indifference, it's the authentic presence of someone who doesn't need anything from you to feel complete. That distinction is subtle, but absolutely crucial, and most content on this subject deliberately blurs it, because selling a manual of techniques is more profitable than pointing toward genuine inner transformation. It's easier to teach someone to act different than to become different. There's a fundamental difference between showing feelings and needing validation, between vulnerability and dependency. There's a difference between telling someone how you feel because you feel it, and telling them because you need them to reassure you, to tell you it's okay, that you're not going to lose them. The first is emotional maturity. The second is fear wearing the costume of a feeling. The emotionally strong man is not the one who doesn't feel. He is the one who feels with complete intensity, but doesn't need anyone else to manage those feelings for him. He can say, "I love you," without it being a hook waiting for something to be said back. He can disagree without panicking. He can face uncertainty without falling apart. That is what attracts. Not hardness, not unavailability, emotional consistency. The sense that this person will be okay no matter what happens, that they don't need me to survive, but they choose me. And that choice comes from abundance, not scarcity. A man without a center doesn't attract a partner, he attracts a caretaker. Schopenhauer used a metaphor I find particularly unsettling. He said that desire is like the pendulum of a clock. It swings between the pain of not having and the boredom of having, between need and satiation, and that most human suffering arises from that constant oscillation between wanting something and reaching it, only to discover you no longer wanted quite as much. When a man is completely available, when he adjusts his entire being to another person's schedule, when he surrenders his own space to always be there, what he involuntarily achieves is the elimination of tension. And without tension, desire goes dark, not out of anyone's cruelty, out of emotional physics. Desire needs space. It needs the other person to be a universe you haven't fully mapped, a mystery worth exploring, someone with a life of their own that existed before you and will continue with or without you. When you dissolve into the other person, when you surrender your mystery, your direction, your center, you eliminate that space, and with it you eliminate the possibility of desire remaining alive. This isn't about pretending to have a life of your own, it's about having one. I want to tell you about the man who disappears. Not the man who leaves physically, the man who dissolves emotionally before a relationship even exists in the very process of pursuing someone. It starts the moment someone interests you. Suddenly, your entire mental energy revolves around that person. You analyze every message, you rehearse conversations in your head, you wonder whether they like you, whether you said something wrong. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. When you're in that state, are you actually thinking about that person? Or are you thinking about yourself, about your fear of losing them, about your need to be seen as enough? For most men, if they're honest, it's the second one. The human brain is designed to pay disproportionate attention to sources of uncertain reward. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. When you don't know whether the other person wants you, your reward system activates with far greater intensity than when things feel safe. The brain literally treats emotional uncertainty as an emergency. But underneath the neuroscience is something more uncomfortable. In many men, that hyper-focus doesn't arise from love. It arises from fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being enough. Fear that long predates that specific person. Patterns learned in childhood. Wounds that never fully healed. And that fear disguises itself as romantic intensity, as passionate love, as limitless dedication. It isn't. It's fear with a different name. And the most painful part, by dissolving into the other person to keep them, you eliminate what was generating attraction in the first place, which creates more fear of rejection, which creates more dissolution, and so on. Schopenhauer would have recognized this as the will devouring itself, the desire to possess, destroying the very possibility of obtaining what is desired. The tighter you grip, the less you hold. The way out is not cynicism. It's not deciding to never become emotionally involved again. It's not building walls around yourself and calling it strength. That produces isolation disguised as independence, and it's just as unhealthy as the dependency it tries to avoid. The real way out is inner work, identifying where that fear comes from, what wound feeds it, beginning slowly, imperfectly to heal it. Not so that you stop feeling, but so that what you feel no longer controls you. And alongside that, something concrete. Rebuild your center. Return to the things that made you yourself before someone else occupied all the space. Your projects, your work, the friendships that don't revolve around whoever you're currently obsessing over. The time alone that isn't empty, but full of yourself. Stop placing your emotional well-being in the hands of someone who doesn't even know they're holding it. Build a life that is valuable regardless of whether someone shares it with you. Not because you don't want to share it, but because sharing something valuable is completely different from building something solely so you have something to share. Nobody can give you what you haven't built inside yourself, and the tragedy is that most people spend their entire lives looking outside for it. Now let's talk about what happens inside a relationship that already exists. There's a moment many men describe without being able to name it, a moment when something shifts. At the beginning, you were more within yourself. You had your own things. You were interesting precisely because you were someone. And then the relationship took hold, and without realizing it, you began to give ground. First your time, then your opinions, then your plans, then your friends, then your projects. Little by little, with the best of intentions, you stopped being yourself and became half of something. The person who chose you didn't choose half of something. They chose someone complete. And when that complete person began to disappear, something in the relationship began to change. Couples who remain genuinely attracted to each other for years are not the ones who have fused into something singular. They are the ones who have learned to remain as complete individuals within a shared project, who still have things to say because they still have lives to live. That requires something almost never mentioned in conversations about relationships: the courage to maintain your identity when someone you love asks you to abandon it. The courage to say no when you want to say no, even when it creates tension. The courage to protect your own direction even when that sometimes means being unavailable. That is not selfishness, that is respect for yourself and for the relationship. Because a relationship between two people who have dissolved into each other is not love, it's codependency. And codependency, even when it feels like love, is a form of fear. Love should make you more yourself, not less. If it's making you disappear, it isn't love, it's consumption. Schopenhauer observes something about desire that has a direct application here: the gap between what people say they want and what they actually choose. There are people who say they want a sensitive man, available, attentive, completely devoted, and when they find exactly that, when they have in front of them someone who meets every one of those stated criteria, something in them doesn't respond the way they expected. Desire doesn't activate, or it appears briefly and then dissolves. That's not incoherence, it's not cruelty, it's the will operating beneath conscious preferences. The primitive instinct doesn't read what the other person says, it reads what they transmit. And where the conscious mind says, "I want sensitivity," the instinct is registering something else entirely. Is this person okay on their own? Can they hold themselves together? Or will I have to do that for them? Understanding this should not lead you to perform strength. It should not lead you to fake indifference or adopt the appearance of someone centered without actually doing the work. That is still the same fear, just wearing a different mask. What it should lead you toward is what Schopenhauer was attempting in his own life with very imperfect results, which is to see the mechanism clearly so you are not enslaved by it, to not be dragged blindly by the pendulum. The goal is not to be attractive, the goal is to be real, with depth, with direction, with the honesty to know your fears without letting them drive. Attractiveness, if it shows up, is a byproduct of that work, not the objective. The work I'm talking about is not fast. It is not a technique you apply this week and see results from next month. It is a process of years, of setbacks, of relationships that fail anyway, of nights when the fear returns even though you thought you had left it behind. Personal growth is not insurance against pain. Schopenhauer understood the mechanism, he described it brilliantly, and yet his relational life was a disaster, because understanding something intellectually does not mean having integrated it into your body, into your patterns, into the automatic responses that surface under pressure. Intellectual understanding is the first step. It is only the first step. What comes after requires turning that understanding into practice, testing it in real situations where fear appears and choosing differently, once, twice, 100 times, until the new pattern starts to feel more natural than the old one. 4 concrete things, because philosophy without application is just entertainment. 1. Learn to be uncomfortable without acting from that discomfort. When you feel the impulse to send that extra message, to seek that confirmation, stop. Not because you shouldn't communicate, but ask yourself, does this come from an authentic place or from fear? 2. Honor your commitments to yourself even when the relationship complicates that. Your work, your training, your friendships, your projects, not as a tactic to seem more interesting, but because those things are part of who you are. Giving them up is giving yourself up. 3. Practice tolerance for uncertainty. You don't know what the other person is feeling at any given moment. You can't control whether they'll love you tomorrow. That uncertainty activates fear. Learning to sit in it without panicking is one of the most difficult and most transformative emotional skills that exists. 4, and hardest, know your wounds, not to use them as excuses, but so they are not the ones making your decisions. We all arrive at adult relationships carrying patterns learned in childhood that were once adaptive and that now, outside their original context, generate the very suffering they were designed to prevent. Your childhood wounds don't disappear when you become an adult, they just get better at disguising themselves as adult problems. Schopenhauer said that knowledge was the only way to free oneself from the tyranny of the will, not repression, not extreme asceticism. Knowledge. Seeing the mechanism in motion, naming it. And from that naming, having a small margin of choice that didn't exist before. That margin is what we're after. Not the man who never feels afraid. The man who feels afraid sees it and chooses anyway. Everything we've discussed, emotional strength, independence, a center of your own, purpose, tolerance for uncertainty, none of that is only about becoming more attractive to others. It is a way to suffer less. The man who constantly needs external validation to feel like enough lives in a state of chronic anxiety, because external validation is not in his control. He is one ignored text message away from an identity crisis. The man who has built his sense of worth from within, who can face rejection without it redefining who he is, that man lives an emotionally freer life. Not necessarily easier, but freer, more his own. And the irony is that this inner work, done for yourself and not to impress anyone, is precisely what generates in others the response you once sought so desperately. Not always, not guaranteed, but with a consistency that is difficult to dismiss. Not because the world is fair, but because authenticity has a texture that others recognize even when they can't describe it. And that texture generates trust, and trust generates attraction. And attraction generates connection. Not the shallow kind built on masks and strategies, but the real kind that holds over time and deepens rather than erodes. The version of yourself that people fall in love with should be a version you actually are, not a performance you can only sustain for so long. Schopenhauer ended his life relatively alone, but he wrote until his final days with a clarity his contemporaries took decades to recognize. He left behind ideas that remain disturbing and useful more than 150 years later. The lesson isn't to imitate him or adopt his pessimism. It's to dare to look honestly at how things actually work, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it contradicts what you want to believe, even when it requires changing something in yourself you've avoided questioning for a long time. That moment of honesty, when you stop searching outside for what can only be built within, is the beginning of something. Not the end of a problem, the beginning of a process. And that process, with all its difficulty and stumbling, is the only one that produces something real. The only one that gives you something no one can take away, because you built it yourself, from within, without depending on anyone to confirm it. So the question I asked you at the start has another dimension now. It's not just why the man who puts in less effort attracts more. It's, what kind of man do you want to be? Not so that someone chooses you, but so that you can also choose from a free place, from a complete place, from a center that belongs to you and that no one can take away, because it isn't in anyone's hands but your own. You won't get there tonight, but you can begin tonight. Most men spend their lives waiting to be chosen. The rare ones become someone worth choosing, and then choose for themselves. If you made it this far, drop a comment saying, "I made it," and I will personally reply to you. If this resonated, subscribe and leave a like if it was worth your time.